I'm going to introduce Runae Lee who's the head of partnerships with Finch, which is found at tryfinch.com. And I know he has brought in a couple of buddies with him that I am not aware of and cannot introduce. So I will leave it to you to do that, Runae.
Yeah, happy to do so. I am joined with Ansel, the co-founder of Finch. Ansel, do you want to say a few words?
Hey all, Ansel, one of the co-founders, COO of Finch, work really closely with partners and Runae over here to really make sure we're building tools and use cases that really make the end users, the employers' lives better, while also making sure we're aligning with all the needs of different stakeholders, from the payroll providers and different systems down to the integration partners as well.
Thanks, Ansel. We're also joined by Ryan Colla. He is going to, Ryan, why don't you quickly introduce yourself? He's from our sales team. He will be silent for most of this presentation, but we wanted him to join just in case there are any questions in chat that he can help kind of facilitate. Ryan?
Sounds great. Thank you, Runae. Hey, everyone. My name is Ryan Colla. I'm one of the founding go-to-market team members here on the sales team. Here to field any questions along with my coworker, Tyler Nix. And Tyler, I'll let you take that intro.
Hey, I'm one of the solutions engineer here at Finch. So any maybe technical questions I can try to help out with?
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining our service briefing today. Again, this is Runae. You will primarily be hearing my voice, although you're going to get a heavy dose of Ansel as well. For today's agenda, we already did intro, so we can skip the section about our speaking panel. What we would like to do is start off by telling you all a little bit about the problem that we're all facing today and the way that Finch is attempting to solve that problem. We will then dive into a founder story. I thought it would be really cool, since we are kind of like the new kid on the block, to kind of talk about how Finch came into fruition. And then we're going to spend about 10 minutes toward the end to talk about some of the use cases that we support today to help kind of provide some color as to the solution that we provide. So before we get started, well, hold on, let me skip ahead. All right. So before I get started, I want to share a quick story about my friend, Fred. That's not his real name, but I promised you this is a real story, right? Fred is currently trying to start up his own company in HR tech. He is a technical founder. He has a small group of engineers that he's hired, and they're working on the next big thing. He reached out to me over LinkedIn, so we set up a call, and he starts talking to me about potentially using Finch for their HRIS and payroll connections. As you can imagine, I'm pretty happy about that, right? But it was pretty nuts to me that they'd be exploring integrations this early. They're like super stealth stage, right? Meaning that they don't even have a product today. To me, that really kind of told me something, that the integration game has changed, right? In the 2010s, integrations used to be this like value add for vendors in terms of, getting into marketplaces and accelerating customer growth. But increasingly, it's table stakes, right? It's a significant problem facing vendors in our space today. And if, I just to kind of, not to put too fine of a point on it, but if any of us were to start a startup today in this space, I mean, you can imagine that integrations would be like a top 3 concern. So that leads us to, the fact that lack of integration is stifling developer growth, developers being synonymous with vendors. There's this huge fragmentation issue in HR tech. To solve that problem, we've seen some really cool things, right? We've seen iPaaS solutions. We've seen a lot of these HRIS and payroll providers building out their own APIs and inviting the world to come and build to them. That's been awesome, but that's created a new problem, right? Which is that now everyone has to build these integrations. They're very, very expensive, and it's kind of posed a challenge for partnerships. Developers have limited resources, but they need to decide between investing in their core product or building more of these one-to-one integrations. And even when they do, each payroll system is a bit different, right? Some of them have APIs, while others rely on older technologies. You might have some data fields that exist for one provider that might not be supported or be called something completely different in another system. And then lastly, like authorization methods and API key handling, those things might differ from system to system. The onus is on the developer to read the docs and figure it all out. And then there's an entire life cycle, right, that you have to manage. Even if you build an integration today, there might be mandatory updates, service outages, and of course, bugs that you have to solve. But it's worth it for vendors because the data is valuable and it helps drive their own products and services for their customers. And so performance management, L&D, tax optimization, 401k, workforce collaboration, the list goes on. They all need HR and payroll data to provide these services for employers. So I want to share some stats, like how many connections are we actually talking about? According to a survey conducted back in 2019, the average data touch points for an SMB was a surprising 18, right? Don't tell this to my dad. He probably has like one, right? He probably just does everything in Excel, including, cutting checks. But for the vast majority of businesses, you need these solutions to run your business, right? And that number only gets worse the larger and more complex your business becomes, right? This tops out around 75 for like really, really large businesses. So let's focus on that middle category for now, right? If you're a vendor and you're trying to be the 32nd solution for a medium-sized business, you're going to have to work with the rest of their HR tech stack, right? Otherwise, if you think you can kind of go it alone, your competitors aren't going to probably take the same approach. So, enabling compatibility with the system of record is incredibly important. So let's talk about how that might be done today. All right, here we have a table, a lot going on. So let me kind of break it down at a high level. This table compares different connection methods, different ways that vendors can pull data on behalf of their customers. First of all, if we look at that second column, CSV uploads, I think we can all agree that downloading and uploading CSVs are not great, right? Lots of potential for error here. What if you upload last week's file? What if it's not in the right format? It's not great for the customer, not great for you. SFTP is also pretty common, but there's a lot of upkeep and maintenance to think about, right? Adding an external admin works, but guess what? You're now using people power to pull the data, which might not be the best use of their time. And then finally, we have one-to-one integrations, right? From a data perspective, those can work really well, but now the vendor bears the cost of building, supporting, right, maintaining, and owning this entire integration lifecycle. So that leads us to the Finch solution, right? We are a universal API. We sell to developers to enable them with data access on behalf of the employers they serve. We believe this is a win-win-win for everyone involved, right? Now they can focus more resources on building their core product. They have a single integration that they need to build, and then they can move on with their lives. Their customers typically do not pay, right, for this service, and that makes us a little bit different than some of the other players in this space. We believe that this is a far more scalable approach to integrations, and frankly, we believe this is like the future. So developers build to a single API. We have a single unifying data model that is compatible across systems. Like why this would matter is like, let's take something as simple as like a preferred name, right? Like that's a field that could not exist in some systems. In one system, it could be name 3, right? In another system, that could be preferred name, right? In another system, it might exist as part of a different object, instead of being as part of like the employee object, maybe it's stored in a separate field, right? Like that's a lot of complexity that we make very, very simple for our developers. So they don't have to do these crazy field mapping exercises, but rather can like use our API documents to say, oh, cool, this is how I get that. A few call outs. We have over 200 compatible systems. We're making something in the neighborhood of 5 million daily API calls, which is pretty nuts. 15,000 employers that have connected using our infrastructure. And when we look at our HRS and payroll coverage, we have about 88% of US employers covered today. Over 150 applications are currently built on our platform to enable data syncing with HRS and payroll platforms. We also call the companies that we work with data partners. What's really cool about this is that on the other side, our data partners are also interested in learning more about who we work with, right? It's a two-way street, right? I mean, vendors naturally want to be in as many marketplaces as possible, but guess what? Like many of the HRS and payroll providers, they want to have good partners too, right? There's always new categories being created, right? That didn't exist the year before, and they're often like when we're talking, they're often like, hey, like, you know, who do you work with for this use case, right? Or hey, I heard about this cool new thing, Runae, like. I'm curious if there's, you know, what you're seeing from like a demand signal perspective, and those are conversations that we love having. And I will share more on that in a second. I wanted to touch briefly on security. All right, so at Finch, we take security very, very seriously. Our infrastructure is designed to exceed industry standards to keep you and your customers' data safe. We enforce TLS 1.2 for data in transit and encrypt data at rest using AES 256-bit encryption. We are SOC 2 and CCPA compliant, subject to GDPR, and are currently pursuing HIPAA compliance. All right, so going back to how we can help the ecosystem make more money. So we have a program right now that is in beta that we call the Finch Flight Program. The idea is that you have all of these HRIS and payroll providers that are looking to grow certain categories. On the other side, you have all of these vendors, right, that represent different use cases. Here's like a representative from each of our top use cases that we support. And oftentimes they're like, hey, the integration is a big blocker for us. Could we just use the pre-built Finch one, right? That's really, really exciting for Finch. Like, we don't want to take a cut of that. We want to facilitate these connections and just be the underlying infrastructure. And so we're currently talking to a lot of our data partners right now to say, hey, like, what are you focused on this year? Oh, you're focused on SOC 2? Well, like, you know, here are some of the players that have opted into our Finch Flight program. Would love to make a direct connection. Providers win because now they have additional added functionality, right? The integration, the technology is already there. And obviously there's, you know, potential for rev share, referrals, et cetera. On the flip side, our vendors win because for them, they are getting, you know, an increased go-to-market footprint, right? They're getting new leads, and they're basically amplifying their marketing efforts, right? They can potentially be listed in a lot of these marketplaces. And so it's, again, a win-win-win for the entire ecosystem. So what are the steps? All right, so first of all, we need to, you know, opt both sides or ask both sides if they want to opt into our program that we also call the accelerator program. The last thing that I want to do is spam either side, right? I know everyone wants like a warm introduction. Those are still very, very important, but I need to also, we want to make sure that when Finch makes an official introduction, that it's, you know, a fairly warm one. We then work closely with the data partner to ensure, hey, does this integration meet your requirements, right? Is there anything that we need to do differently for like the different use cases that we support? Because guess what? Like every use case requires, you know, different data fields, et cetera. We work with our data providers to finalize target categories, right? We then go to our developers, the vendors, to gauge their interest. We will then proactively make those introductions to one another. What's great about it is you can have a direct, you can focus on just the commercial aspect of the partnership. Once both sides agree, voila, you're off to the races. So now I wanted to spend a little bit of time explaining how like a typical data flow works. This is my last slide, and then we're going to get to a more interesting bit, I promise. But this should give everyone in the room a good sense of like how what a typical data flow looks like. So imagine that an employer admin initiates a data request from their favorite application. The company's data is stored in their HRS or payroll system that we're calling Donut HR. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the application in question is Carta. So on the back end, the application uses a Finch access token to make an API call to the appropriate Finch endpoint. Finch receives the request and uses a Donut HR API token to make an API call to the appropriate provider endpoints, in this case, Donut HR's endpoint. Donut HR receives the API request and securely passes back the data that is associated with that specific employer back to Finch. Finch receives the response. We standardize it to our universal data mapping structure and send in a Finch API response back to the application, back to Carta. Carta receives the Finch response, updates their system with the data, right? It could be a list of employees. It could be, pay data, things of that nature. The employer admin, right, now sees the imported Donut HR data in their application. So thanks everybody for listening, allowing me to talk a little bit about Finch, the problem that we're trying to solve, and how like a typical data flow works. Give me a second to shift gears here and dive right into our founding story.
Yeah, and I know we have some questions on the in the chat, and Tyler's taking a crack at maybe async, but we can also at the end kind of dive deeper into that, since I'm sure that there's some more details we can provide to give a little bit more visibility into the different types of connections that we established, given the range of compatibility and technological advancement in some of these systems, since some of them do not have APIs, and there's different ways of kind of setting up access and making sure that there's compliant, secure access to that information in a seamless way.
Awesome. So how did Finch come to be? So I'm bringing on Ansel, the person that just spoke. He is from Philly. I heard there was a ball game on Sunday.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, let's not talk about that. I really don't want to relive that one, but yeah, I will not.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Ward backs you up on that one. Yeah.
It's very painful to watch. Luckily, I did not make any bets. I think that would have been very, very bad day. But yeah, so
fair enough.
Yeah, so maybe I'll give a quick intro on the founding story. I think sometimes it gives a little bit of insight into how we come across this problem, and really some of the things that we've learned from the market that have indicated that this is much more widespread, and why we kind of wanted to continue to accelerate our path towards really unifying this employment data ecosystem that extends beyond just kind of that payroll HR systems, but into other modules like benefits administration data and applicant tracking software, so that you can actually get that full employee lifecycle visibility without having to go and understand what is the data type mapping for each different system. And so maybe to start, right, Jeremy, my other co-founder, and I this is actually the fifth thing that Jeremy and I built. A lot of failures in there.
Wow.
And the main challenge is we were actually building something more in the lending infrastructure space. So very, very different, but it came down to at the beginning of kind of the pandemic that no one wanted that infrastructure, because once the pandemic hit, no one knew when loans were actually going to be able to be paid back. And so launching any products that were built on lending just didn't make a whole lot of sense. And this is kind of more by happenstance. And I think this is oftentimes the real journey many companies kind of have in terms of their path towards figuring out real problems. Is we were kind of winding that down and had a small business lending platform come to us and said, hey, there's this new program called the Paycheck Protection Program that allows employers to get a non-recourse kind of loan that they don't have to pay back to keep people on payroll. And we thought that was definitely something that'd be really valuable to a lot of businesses. The government was pumping a lot of money into this program. Challenge is to understand how much that loan should be. You kind of need to know how much they've been paying in payroll, because if there's no way to validate that, then there may not be a chance to get that money from the government as a lender. And so what we were kind of said, yeah, totally, we can build this, we can gain access and help kind of scope the just gross pay or gross wages for that period of time for an organization. And as we started digging into this, we realized it's frankly much more complicated than we ever expected. One from the like data side of things, but also just the fact that there's 5,700 different payroll and HR systems in the US alone. We did a whole white paper on this because it was astounding to us. And the biggest challenge is that about 55% of the employers in the US are on the top 10 kind of systems. And then after that, it's a very, very, very long tail. And there's even about 9% of US employers that are still literally using like pen and paper or on-prem systems for payroll. And so that becomes something where after you build even 10, 20 integrations, you're not even capturing 60% of the market. What do you do to all the customers that come to you that say, hey, I'm on Alaska's best payroll system. How come you don't work with that? And it's like, well, yeah, because economically, it doesn't make sense to build compatibility with a system that maybe only 2,000 small businesses use. And so our goal was to really kind of build some of that compatibility. And frankly, when we finally got even something set up, the Paycheck Protection Program was kind of over. So there's this kind of odd coincidence in building for something that we thought was super important, but was naturally short-lived. But what was interesting is that out of the woodwork, we had companies in 401k space, workers' compensation insurance, other platforms that said, hey, I don't need to use this internally, but I want to actually be able to gather key bits of information from my customers, make this an easy experience, and frankly, say yes to more business that I'm currently going, yeah, no, you're going to have to send us an Excel file every single week. And that just isn't the experience people expect anymore. And we've kind of seen this huge wave that Runae's been talking about around wanting that deeper connectivity and really expecting that that's how these systems and their operations and people stack operate together. Because ultimately, managing data flows, things like that, it's not something that is core to running a business, but it's mandatory. And so that should be something that comes out of the box for any new application or old application that sells to employers to make their lives easier.
Right. That's super interesting. So that was what, 2.5 years ago at this point?
Yeah, like 3 years, which has been quite a journey. And I think it's been a lot of learnings. We have had to bring in like in-house payroll specialists and things like that to really build deep understanding of this ecosystem and the fun tax codes, things like that, that we need to make sure that we're mapping, because many of our customers take that data and literally ship it to the IRS for record keeping or reporting standards.
Cool. That makes a ton of sense. So one thing that we saw in a different space, fintech, was that Plaid enabled the creation of all these cool new use cases, right? Like neobanks, peer-to-peer payments, personal finance tools, by unlocking financial data. I've already touched upon some of the use cases that we support, but could you talk to us a little bit more about like newer use cases that we've helped enable?
So I'll kind of zoom in on one that I think is just like particularly interesting and exciting, just because I've never seen this coming out of left field. There's actually a couple companies now that use us where they are able to take location information from where individuals work, as well as the locations of the offices. And for hybrid or fully in-person offices, they're able to calculate the different routes that people take to get to work, and then aggregate those calculations to generate a carbon footprint for the entire organization in real time. This is something I've never heard of. I don't exactly know how they do this, but we are a core part of their calculation, because apparently worker commute on a daily basis is about 70% of the footprint of many companies, and being able to reduce a huge push for kind of doing remote or hybrid workforces that also aligns well with the values of employees themselves.
Got it. That's incredible. I love hearing those stories, because it's like you never know what's next, right? So I'm interested to hear more about how Finch is focused on the employment data space specifically. Like, is there any like larger trends that you're noticing in this ecosystem?
This is something that a lot of the partners and people in this ecosystem are really kind of starting to see play out. There is the biggest challenge that I think we're going to start to see really start to need to get some sort of collaboration across the ecosystem on is around data standards. And really specifically, at least defining, doesn't need to be applicable to everything, but some sort of core data structure, data standards, practices that help everyone in the ecosystem be able to communicate across systems, but then also give employers an understanding of the mapping of their own organization and going, hey, at the base layer, you do need to have this information filled out in these systems of record for frankly tax purposes, things like that, but also for hygiene and really getting to allow other companies to give insights into the workforce. And so I'm actually on the board of a nonprofit. It's been around for about 22 years, 23 years now, called HR Open Standards. It's a really, really like powerful consortium of people. UKG teams on this, ADP teams on this. It's really, really. I'm sure they have been. I've been at the last board meeting, definitely this consortium came up. So it's great that you point that out, Katrina. But I think what's exciting is like this is like E0, I think, in terms of kind of building standards. There's different layers and different parts of the employee journey, from resume structure and ingesting data to applicant tracking system. And how do you actually clarify candidate information? What is something that should be available across systems? And eventually building deeper into other modules. Limmer does a good job on the benefits administration side and kind of insurance data. And so there's a lot more that needs to be done here. The caveat here is that it's going to take a while, and there's always this comic strip. I think it's like XCKD or something like that that says there's 12 standards out there, and someone comes up and going, we need to figure out how to make all these things unified. And that is the story of how the 13th standard. So there is definitely a lot of things to learn about other ecosystems. And I think the one that we hope to see this kind of move towards is that open banking ecosystem that you see in Europe that really pioneered the access to that data, but also helps create some standardization that allows for much better interoperability. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it benefits those end users, the employers and the employees that need to have solutions that are better suited for their specific organization and the way they work. And that's kind of where we want to continue to build towards, but it's not going to be just us, right? And we expect to work closely with all the different constituents to find ways to drive this forward, because no one wants to spend time doing field mapping exercises and doing a lot of data QA when they could be doing things that drive value to everyone else.
Yeah. No, that all makes a ton of sense. I know there's data normalization is a huge topic, and I think it's only going to grow in importance as we move away from a million special little snowflakes into something that is kind of standardized across the board. Ansel, do you have any final comments? I got knocked off my rattle. I skipped a few questions. It might be weird to double back at this point, but that's okay. But yeah, any final thoughts?
No, I mean, I think, look, we definitely take a very collaborative approach to this ecosystem. I think even in situations where people think, hey, we're competitors, actually, oftentimes there's a lot of learnings that we can share with each other. And frankly, at the end of the day, like the pie is big enough, it's growing. And more importantly is if we can make sure we are sending people to the right solutions for their needs. Because ultimately, like, we're in the business of also saying no to things that were not a good fit, because ultimately that doesn't benefit the end people. And so that's why we actually like talking to iPaaS providers, because frankly, there's a lot of companies that come to us going, hey, I want to use you for internal purposes. And we're like, absolutely not. That's not a good use for us. Let's put you in touch with people that are really well built and understand your workflows. So we're always looking to send people to places so that we can at least say, hey, we're not the solution. We know someone who is, and we trust them to be able to figure out your best interest. And I think that's the approach we want to take and continue to do, because that's how you elevate the whole ecosystem. And it does take a village to solve this problem, because it's felt by millions of businesses around the world.
Yeah, no, plus one to all of that. I mean, I definitely see like the Finch solution as complementary to a lot of the existing iPaaS solutions that are out there that are built, very, very good, one-to-one integrations for like larger, more complex organizations to take advantage of. But that's part of the reason why like I decided to join Finch. I wanted to help accelerate this ecosystem, bring us all a little closer together. And so I definitely appreciate those thoughts, Ansel, and thank you for letting me be part of your journey.
Hey, it's a two-way street.
Awesome. All right. So to close this out, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the different use cases that we support, since, y'all might be thinking, okay, well, how exactly do these different companies in these different verticals use Finch today? So I wanted to quickly look at a selected few. This is going to be a little bit technical, so apologies in advance to anyone that is, if this flies over your head. I promise that I'll try to keep it nice and light. So today we're going to be looking at compensation management, DE&I, employee engagement and collaboration, people analytics, security and compliance, and tax credits. So this is just a small like cross section. Again, we support over 20 different use cases. But this does give like a high level overview of the primary use case for using a solution like Finch. All right, let's start with compensation planning. Ansel, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go for it.
Did it feel like compensation planning software wasn't like a thing 5 years ago?
So from what I understand, and frankly, we still do a little bit of this ourselves, was it's like pretty much Excel. It's
Yeah.
like a lot of just pulling surveys from Radford, right? And then downloading and hoping this data that's 6 months old is still relevant. And so it is something that kind of really exploded, I think, really in 2001, 22, when hiring kind of spiked. But it is definitely continues to be a really interesting use case and is an ongoing problem for organizations.
Yeah, I mean, because I think like benchmarking has become really important, right? Well, one of the things that we've seen is a lot of states and jurisdictions now are requiring that employers publish, right, the pay ranges. And if you're going to do that, then you got to know, okay, what's the market paying? And the market, right, what the market is paying is often like, relying upon, or at least it was back in the day, like self-reported data.
Yep.
Right. Or maybe there was only like one or two players in the space that had access to it. And so I love the fact that, we're helping, some of these solutions help businesses with compensation and kind of headcount planning. And so like, this is not an exhaustive list. We just kind of wanted to pull out different data points that we thought were interesting and unique for that use case. So for compensation planning, those companies could typically pull things like gender, job title, work location, income, and income history, right? The reason why that's important is because you want to ensure that equity is there's like parity across an organization, right? If you pull all of the data for an existing role, for example, and then you maybe filter or compare it for gender, right? That's like one easy way to see, okay, there's some inequality here, right? Also, you could retrieve historical income data to assess if employees have been compensated fairly over time, right? Because if you see any kind of weird spikes, you might be wondering, hey, what's going on here? And so anything that a compensation planning provider can do to make to kind of deliver these insights with actual real data instead of guesswork has been really, really powerful. For employers who want to ensure equitable pay, but also like they're being required to in many cases, right? So the writing is on the wall, and I think that it's awesome to see like all of the plethora of solutions that exist today.
Yeah.
All right, this is one that's close to our hearts, DE&I. So DE&I tools use Finch to pull employee census data to enable customers to work towards and meet various DE&I goals. So DE&I platforms use Finch for several different reasons. One is to leverage demographic data, information about the person to help leaders understand diversity and representation across the company, right? This can include gender diversity, age diversity, and so on. They also want to retrieve job information to deliver insights on kind of the representation on the leadership team. So that's why they will also pull things like job title. Anything you wanted to add here?
Yeah. And the challenge here is always, right, there's certain fields like ethnicity is actually something we support, but it's not in every system. And sometimes it's a custom field, which we'll also support. And so there is a bit of like edge case mapping that does have to be done. And we have kind of a team that helps kind of talk through those workflows for every different individual use case to make sure, hey, you're set up for success, but also here's some of the expectations that are maybe unique to that system so that when you have someone saying, you know what to do with that custom field and kind of saying, oh, this is likely going to be one of three things and being able to map that kind of more efficiently than one by one every single time someone connects.
Awesome. All right, another one of my favorites, employee engagement. So employee engagement platforms retrieve employee census data, items like work, anniversary, birthday, address for swag and gifting management. So employee engagement platforms can use Finch to locate where the employee sits within the company and team structures, retrieve address and email data for swag gifting management, retrieve information for key employee life cycle milestones, such as a first day, a promotion, or work anniversary, right? So as you can imagine, if someone is is joining a new company, right? I think the old days, in the olden days, you would have to, spin up a separate website, go to your favorite e-commerce store. What would be really cool? Oh, okay, well, I'll send them like this, this like gift basket, or I'm going to send them stuff from like the big swag closet, right? It's a lot of manual work. And so a lot of these newer, more modern companies are automating this process. Hey, as soon as that you onboard a new person, we're going to know. And based on their address, we can send them, a predefined goodie basket and make sure they have a really good experience and that it's not a huge lift for the end user.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool. There's a lot of different companies that kind of make this whole process for gifting to employees, building that engagement a lot more special and automated, because as you get to hundreds of employees, being able to track everything becomes pretty onerous, and you want to be able to kind of manage that in one solution. So it's been really interesting to see those proliferate and kind of adjust the way that people kind of build that connectivity with employees as soon as they start, as well as at key milestones throughout their life cycle.
Love it. All right, people analytics. I feel like another vertical or use case that has just seen tremendous growth in the last like 4 to 5 years. So people analytics platforms pull employee census data to surface real-time people insights or trigger automated processes around key milestones, such as with start date, anniversary, and birthday. They use Finch for several different reasons. One is to kick off processes around key employee lifecycle milestones, so not too dissimilar from what you had heard before, as well as retrieving data for employee surveys or performance reviews. I want to also mention there's probably a few other things that are missing. I know, Ansel, you had written a blog post, right, that kind of covered some of this. Like, what are some of the other analytics that we've been able to help businesses with?
Yeah, so I think what's really interesting, especially on people analytics, is that you get the raw data for this, but you can kind of really capture a bunch of different KPIs from like employee mobility within an organization, seeing title changes over time, pay changes, as well as getting a sense for transitions. And that's actually like a metric that employers are really focused on, especially when you think about retention being a lot more valuable and much more cost effective than hiring someone new in a place. The other one is employee retention. And oftentimes you look at it not just as a whole organization, but oftentimes different teams, and really getting a sense of, oh, this manager has had a lot of people churn out underneath of them. Maybe there's some information that we need to start to gather to understand what that experience is like, because especially as organizations grow, taking a holistic approach can sometimes lead you to forget or not look at the kind of key drivers, because at the end of the day, people leave not necessarily just because of the company, but oftentimes it's due to their manager. And so being able to kind of tie some of those things and starting to set goals, benchmarks for different teams to figure out proactively, hey, we need to do something here, or hey, this team has had a lot of transitions, internal mobility is really high. Average tenure on that team is 3 years. That's pretty amazing for this industry. Let's figure out what they're doing right and transfer that to other teams that can learn from it. And so I think people analytics is still like kind of scratching the surface of what you can do there. And I think for us is the goal is to build out more compatibility with adjacent systems so that you can start to really get an understanding of total compensation, equity, benefits, cash. What exactly is the kind of cost of this employee, but then also, are they using all these things in the way that's actually most aligned with their goals? Because maybe that mix is not exactly where it should be. And so there's a lot of these like holy grails of data within people analytics that are still really hard to mine. And we want to kind of build towards more use cases that allow for a lot more intelligent insights for individual employers, depending on their workforce makeup, as well as their industry they're in.
Love that. Yeah, I mean, I know that a lot of companies still take a very reactive approach, right? A ton of people quit and they're all scratching their heads saying, well, we need to do more surveys, right? And so I love the fact that a lot of people analytics platforms are empowering their users with data so that they can make informed decisions, say, hey, y'all, this is how we're actually doing. This is what our employees, are all on the edge here, or no, they love us and they're going to stay forever. So love that. All right, security and compliance. So compliance platforms pull employee census data to automatically set up profiles and issue security trainings to new team members. One specific vertical that comes to mind is SOC 2, right? Again, I don't think that was something that I thought of or that existed until a few years ago, but they use us for a few different reasons. One, locate where an employee sits within the company and team structure. Two, create new accounts for new hires, send them security trainings and company policies to the right email address. This would include kind of like that onboarding checklist of items. Read this, acknowledge that. And then finally, send updates to employees on key dates, such as having to retake a compliance training on their work anniversary. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think this is going to continue to become more and more of a thing, right? In California, sexual harassment compliance training for employers over 25 employees. And there's SOC 2, there's HIPAA compliance, there's all these different components that, again, are mandatory once you say, hey, I'm going to be compliant. And they can be really difficult to manage as an administrator if you have to go, hey, I got to keep sending emails everywhere. When you can say, hey, automatic, and then it's a, hey, we've noticed that this person hasn't filled this out, or we know this person left, you still have access, they still have access to certain systems. You need to deprovision that. This is something that really helps proactively capture those things and really make sure that there's no lapse in security or training that would happen if you have someone manually kind of keeping track of this on a spreadsheet.
Right. Oh yeah, I mean, it's a absolute. I can't imagine trying to do this outside of one of these platforms. I mean, it can get pretty hairy.
Yeah, we do a lot of security training and compliance, as you can imagine. So it's definitely great to be able to work with companies that do that and actually power our own systems. But it is something where we uniquely feel the pain of this. So it's something that we really enjoy powering and making easier for any other employer that uses these services.
Great. This is our last slide. So tax credits. Another one that I think has been kind of top of mind, especially for a lot of small businesses over the last couple of years. Tax credit platforms use company level information as well as granular employee census and payroll data to accurately request tax credits for customers. So they use us for confirming a company's eligibility for certain tax credits, retrieving historical data for retroactive tax credit claims, as well as retrieving granular payroll and payment data, such as Social Security taxes per payroll run. And for those of you who don't know what some of these include, this would include like the employee retention tax credit that the government provides for companies that hire people from certain protected categories. And so there's, without kind of getting too much into the weeds, a lot of these platforms make it super easy for you to identify, who is eligible, so that you get back a tax credit, which is a huge boon, and essentially helps pay for the solution itself, which is pretty wild. Ansel, do you have any final thoughts on kind of the growth of like these ERC, ERTC platforms?
Yeah, it's been interesting. This is one we didn't really expect, but there's a lot of government tax credits.
Mhm.
There's R&D tax credits, ERC, which is kind of a specific one related to COVID. And there's even ones that are like worker opportunity tax credits that are more related to specific types of workers that are also included. And so the challenge here is that there's so many different codes. The process of doing this is actually pretty esoteric, and a lot of it is written around like payroll data. And so being able to actually ingest that information quickly, build out something that can withstand an audit, because the IRS does look at these things, and being able to effectively get up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, even R&D tax credit, you could now get $500,000.
Millions. Yeah.
So that's been something that's been really exciting in terms of just a net new innovation that didn't exist when we started, that has really kind of proliferated as you open up access to this data in a secure, kind of compliant way. And then maybe one other thing, and I don't think we have it here, but it's one that we are really starting to see more pull from is these benefits companies, right? And this is a product that we are kind of fully launching out of beta over the next kind of couple couple of months is the ability to not only read information down to the pay statement level detail, but actually writing contributions and deductions back into these systems to allow for someone that contributes to their 401k or their like commuter benefit to be able to reflect that accurately in their tax statements, so that it's properly impacting pre-tax or post-tax earnings. And that's really important for, again, they have to send this to the IRS every couple months. And so making sure those records are correct and also making it easier for that data to be flowing in and out of the system in a really specific way allows for the end employer to go, great, you made your contribution, it's hit you on a tax perspective, and now it's going into an IRA or a 401k that helps you build your nest egg. And that's something that a lot of these companies had to build in-house. Some companies we've talked to have spent $10 million doing that. Over 4 years, have 50 people manually pulling data. And so what we want to do is kind of replace a lot of that and turn it into something that is just a better experience for everyone, especially for something that's so mission critical to like have a retirement savings. And I think now in California, any employer that has anyone working for them now has to have some sort of retirement benefit. And so I think we're going to start to see more and more of these use cases in insurance, things like that, that are mandatory for any employer. And we want to make that process much easier for them, because ultimately at the end of the day, no one wants to upload a PDF of every single like pay run made over the last year to their workers' compensation program and then get billed an extra $1,000 because they didn't have the true up. And like, that's just not a good experience for anyone. And we want to make that much more clean, much more compliant, and frankly, a lot better from a audit standpoint, so that this is all kind of above bar and verified from the system of truth.
Awesome. All right, we are at the 50-minute mark. I wanted to now kind of transition to the Q&A portion of today's presentation. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. Ryan, Tyler, or Katrina, yeah, is there anything that we can address live on the call? Or I know some of this stuff might get pretty technical, and so we're happy to also take items offline and follow up with folks individually.
Yeah, for the most part, you've got a pretty technically savvy group of people here, as opposed to, I won't say, but sometimes the customers you're talking to may not know as much as, but this group is pretty savvy. Actually, Ryan's been answering all the questions that I've thrown out practically before I asked them. So he's been doing a great job. Let me see if we've missed any.
Yeah, maybe I can add a little bit of voiceover to one of his questions, and then if Tyler has a second to talk through that assisted, automated, there's probably some things that we can at least share at a high level there. But maybe one of the questions you asked is like, do we target, SMB, mid market, enterprise platforms? And so we do integrate with the gambit. So we have like, your small mom and pop, like taco trucks down the street connected to one of our developers. But then we also have like public companies that use Workday or like Paylocity or Paycom also connected. So we generally, I think I would say like, we're pretty flexible across the board. That said, I think the area we'll probably draw the line today is really at that super enterprise level. So that's like 50K employees plus. These are the people that are like Oracle PeopleSoft, that's on-prem version 15.06.
Right.
Integration requirements, or are on systems that that just don't even have, that are really kind of more fully configurable, customized systems.
Yeah.
That's where we start to go, hey, let's work with iPaaS, or let's send them to an iPaaS because they know the ins and outs of the stuff, the unique custom side of things. And ultimately, there is like a nice kind of handoff that makes for a better alignment to it. So we try to focus on that. Mid-market and enterprise works as well. Again, we have Workday integrations and SAP success factors, but oftentimes the fragmentation problem is really at that mid-market and SMB where it's under 500 employees. We start to just see people on systems you've never heard of. To find some way to say yes to them.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Like Alaska's biggest payroll system.
I love that.
That's a good example. I like that.
Just meet them just so that we can say we have a deeper connection with it. But Tyler, I don't know if you're still on. I want to make sure that if you are, if there's any quick overview on the assisted versus automated. I know you kind of wrote a piece of it out, but maybe if there's additional detail you want to provide, that'd be helpful. Otherwise, I can do it.
Yeah, I guess it would be like Jonathan, did that help answer your question, or like what follow-up questions do you have based off of that kind of instantaneous versus of assisted kind of properties of the two APIs?
Hey guys, I'm good. I know I'm gonna set some time with Ryan separately, so we'll talk in detail about it. Yeah, thanks so much for the presentation. Appreciate it. And thanks, Katrina and team.
Yeah, thank you all for hopefully it was a little more engaging, different. We wanted to make a little bit more discussion and give you at least some insights, because oftentimes we want to kind of give almost like brainstorming for some of our potential customers or partners, because oftentimes they go, wait, what could I do with that information? And that's usually when we start getting the ball rolling and kind of talking through unique workflows, which is always fun.
Yeah, having that hub concept where you can just connect to one and have it, translate it wherever you want to say it is amazing. That's a huge differentiator. And the fact that smaller businesses can actually get the integrations they need, and they don't have, mom and pop, and mom's the marketing person and the integration builder and the, so they're not
Well, I mean,
doing everything hand by hand.
yeah, our view is that for the end user, particularly, I mean, definitely on the SMB side, like they, if you put a paywall in front of the integrations, it's probably going to hurt like their ability or their adoption rate, right? Like, and I think a lot of developers are saying, hey, we'll bear that cost, and because at the end of the day, like we know that if our end user purchases our solution, turns on all of these the integrations that we support, that's going to help their own retention, right? And make their products super sticky. So yeah, it's definitely a different model, working more closely with the developers. But we hope that this is this one to many, one to X approach is a far more scalable solution than having to have like a dedicated integrations team that is building integration, going to build 4 to 6 integrations this year and probably build another 4 to 6 next year, and it'll never end, right? So that's something that we're hoping to solve.
How about the ATS hub? When is that coming? Right? Because how many ATSs are there, Ward? There's 80,000 or something.
At least 800. Yeah, at least.
We started testing some of that out. I think we're trying to get a sense or like how much the demand is, or like what people are thinking in terms of like depth of requirements, because oftentimes people want to write data into it, create a new candidate, input from things. And so that's something we're exploring. We have kind of some tests. We have like partnership with like Greenhouse and rolled out lever integration, but the main thing is that long tail, and just for us is doing the same mapping exercise and understanding like what does this look like, because when you get to like Talio, right, very different structure, very different kind of like set of workflows. And so we want to be really thoughtful about how we do that, since we do that with kind of that core payroll HR system to start.
Again, I have this opinion. I wouldn't bother with Taleo.
Well, hopefully no one here ever listens.
Don't tell it's Taleo.
Well, I mean, they're pushing their ORC now, right? So the TBE has been deprecated already, I think, and then TEE.
Yeah, so I know we're at time, but yeah, if there's any additional questions, please do reach out to us. Like Ryan has provided his information here. He's definitely the right point person, and then he'll make sure that we direct it to technical resources like Tyler, or if there's other ones, we're happy to kind of jump on a call, make sure that we.
Yeah. Do you want to throw your LinkedIn or your email addresses in there so people can reach out to you directly, because they probably have questions that they maybe don't want everyone to know about?
100%. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us, Katrina, Ward. Special thanks for helping us prepare and sponsoring, or helping us sponsor our very first event with y'all. It was great talking to everybody. I will be at HR Transform in case any of you are attending. Holler at me. And with that, I'll let you get on with the next event.
Yes, thank you all. We are, the next event at 3:00 is basically, we're having an open discussion for people that are in transition. So if you are hiring, maybe you want to stick around, but other than that, we're just going to throw out some tips and tricks about how you can find the hidden gem positions that are available in our industry.
Yeah, are you guys hiring?
We are. That is a good point. Let me see if one of our technical recruiters can jump on that. 'cause
Well,
I
this
think-
would, this probably be more in the alliance and partnership.
Yeah, alliances, partnerships.
Or, sales.
I
type-
may or may not be hiring on my team.
sales
but
type.
might not actually go back and look. We
And
are
Diana's like, what?
right here.
No, if anything, Diana can, yeah, no, we need, more is more, right? So yeah, no, I am actually like hiring for my team, but we are, I think we have a pretty full candidate pipeline in basically late stages, so.
You just threw him right under the bus, Ward.
So, a little
Hey.
awkward, but I'm gonna, we'll step away now. No,
Yeah.
but I will say this, like if any, like I'm always, always looking to make new connections. I mean, we're in partnerships, right?
Absolutely.
So please find me on LinkedIn. I want to be, a resource, right, for everybody on this call, or on the next call, I guess. And who knows? Like, hopefully, if we might be growing, a headcount over the course of the year. It doesn't have to be right this minute. So, we'd love to kind of stay connected and keep conversations going until there's a good moment.
But for the technical, I will keep in mind because I'll go and check out because we do have people reaching out all the time. They just won't be in this session.
Yeah, that
So
makes a
can
lot of sense.
certainly refer people over for that purpose as well. And you are going to need to hire because this event is going to get you so much business. There you go.
I like it.
Love it. All right.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
guys. Thank you.
Well done. Nice job, guys.
Well.
Yes, excellent.